The blood-soaked sunset painted the Montana sky crimson as Nathaniel Edwards rode into Whispering Creek, a town as unforgiving as the man himself, a gunslinger whose past kept him moving westward like a tumbleweed chased by ghosts. The year was 1876, and the West was still wild, untamed, and as dangerous as the memories that haunted him. Nathaniel dismounted from his dusty Palomino, Ember, his spurs jangling against the weathered boardwalk. His hat, once black but now faded to the color of dried mud, was pulled low over eyes that had seen too much death. At 32, the lines etching his sun-weathered face told stories he'd never speak aloud. "Water and grain for the horse," he said, handing a stable boy 2 coins. "And point me toward whoever's got whiskey that won't blind a man." The boy, no older than 14, pocketed the money and nodded toward a weathered building with peeling paint. "The silver dollar. Miss Chambers just bought it last spring. She don't water down her drinks like old Simmons used to." Nathaniel nodded his thanks, adjusted his gun belt, and headed toward the saloon. The name Chambers meant nothing to him, just another stranger in a long line of faces he'd forget by the time he rode out. The saloon doors swung open at his push, and the usual scene greeted him: card players hunched over felt-covered tables, working men drowning the day's dust, and a piano player massacring a tune in the corner. What wasn't usual was the woman behind the bar, not the painted dove he expected, but a woman with fire in her eyes and copper hair pulled back in a practical knot. "What'll it be?" she asked, without the practiced smile most barkeeps offered newcomers. "Whiskey, the kind worth drinking." She poured amber liquid into a surprisingly clean glass and slid it across the bar. 2 bits. Nathaniel placed the coins on the counter, his calloused fingers brushing against hers for the briefest moment. Her eyes green as spring grass met his, and for a moment neither moved. "You passing through or staying?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Always passing through," he answered, taking a swallow of whiskey that burned just right. "Never been much for staying." "Got a name, stranger?" "Nathaniel Edwards." "Meredith Chambers," she replied, gesturing to the space around them. "Welcome to my establishment." As he nursed his drink, Nathaniel watched Meredith work. Unlike most saloon owners, she served drinks herself, handled rowdy customers with a firm word instead of a shotgun, and kept the books open beside the register. She was a curiosity, a woman running a business in a town where most women were wives, whores, or spinsters. "You own this place outright?" he asked when she returned to refill his glass. "Every splinter and nail," she said with a hint of pride. "My uncle left it to me when he passed. Most folks thought I'd sell and head east. I decided differently." Before Nathaniel could respond, the saloon doors burst open. 3 men entered, trail-worn, armed and radiating trouble. Their leader, a tall man with a jagged scar running from eye to jaw, scanned the room before his gaze landed on Meredith. "Well now, if it ain't the pretty widow still playing at business," the scarred man said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Thought you'd have come to your senses by now, Meredith." "You're not welcome here, Tate," Meredith said, her voice steady though Nathaniel noticed her knuckles whitening as she gripped the bar. "I told you last time what would happen if you came back." Tate laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "And what's that? You'll shoot me." "Your dead husband tried that. Didn't work out well for him." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Nathaniel watched as patrons slipped away from tables, clearing paths to the door. They knew trouble when they saw it. "I'm not asking again," Meredith said, reaching beneath the bar. "Neither am I," Tate replied, his hand moving to his holster. "The bank's called your loan. You can't pay. I'm here to help you understand your options." Nathaniel set his glass down with deliberate care. "Seems to me the lady's made her position clear." All eyes turned to him. Tate sized him up with cold eyes. "This ain't your business, stranger." "Maybe not," Nathaniel agreed, turning slightly so his right hand hung free near his holster. "But I paid for a quiet drink and you're making that difficult?" Tension crackled between them. Nathaniel had seen men like Tate before, bullies who backed down when faced with someone who might fight back. But there was something personal in Tate's eyes when he looked at Meredith, something that told Nathaniel this wasn't just about money. "You got yourself a guard dog, Meredith." Tate sneered. "Won't save you, I'll be back tomorrow, have my money or the deed." He turned to leave, then paused. "Or maybe I'll just take something else as payment." After they left, the room exhaled collectively. The piano player tentatively resumed his tune, and conversation slowly bubbled up again. Nathaniel turned back to the bar to find Meredith staring at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't need saving," she said firmly. "Didn't say you did." He took another sip of whiskey. "But 3 against 1 are poor odds, even if you've got whatever you're hiding under that bar." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. She lifted a sawed-off shotgun onto the counter. "I can handle myself." "I don't doubt it." He finished his drink. "What's his grievance with you?" Meredith hesitated, then sighed. "Thomas Tate wanted to buy this place when my husband died. I refused. He's got connections at the bank, and suddenly my reasonable loan got called in early. I have 3 days to pay $500 I don't have." Nathaniel whistled low. "That's a lot of whiskey to sell in 3 days. More than I could sell in 3 months in this town." She shook her head. "But I'm not giving up. Michael, my husband, built this place. It's all I have left of him. You got any other options?" "None I'm willing to take," she said, her jaw set firmly. "Tate's made it clear what he'd accept instead of money." Nathaniel nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. He should walk away. This wasn't his fight. He'd learned long ago that other people's problems only became his problems if he let them. And yet, something about Meredith Chambers made him hesitate. "Got a room to let?" he heard himself asking. Surprise flickered across her face. "Upstairs. $2 a night includes breakfast." He placed the money on the bar. "I'll take it for a few days." "Staying longer than you planned?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Just thinking a real bed might be nice for a change." He stood, gathering his hat. "And I like to finish my whiskey without interruptions." As she led him upstairs to a small but clean room, Nathaniel told himself he was just tired of sleeping under the stars. That he'd move on once he'd rested. That this town and its troubles, and especially this fiery-haired widow, weren't his concern. But as Meredith handed him the key, their fingers brushed again, and for the first time in years, Nathaniel felt something stir inside him that he'd thought long dead. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you did downstairs." "I didn't do anything," he replied. "You stayed," she said simply. "Most men would have left rather than risk getting involved." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "I'm still planning to ride out before your trouble comes due." She nodded, accepting his words without judgment. "Sleep well, Mr. Edwards." "Nathaniel," he corrected. "Nathaniel," she repeated, and the sound of his name on her lips followed him into his dreams that night. Morning came with the scent of coffee and bacon. Nathaniel dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, finding Meredith in the small kitchen behind the saloon. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger in the morning light. "You cook for all your guests?" he asked, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. "Only when they intervene in my disputes," she replied with a small smile. "Consider it additional payment." As they ate, Meredith explained more about her situation. Her husband Michael had been the town's deputy until he was shot investigating cattle rustling 2 years ago. The saloon had been their dream, a respectable place where miners, ranchers, and townfolk could gather. After his death, she'd taken out a loan to keep it running through the hard times. The loan wasn't due for another year, she explained, refilling his coffee. But suddenly the bank's calling it in. Tate's behind it, I'm sure. He owns half the businesses in town already. "Why's this place so important to him?" Meredith sighed. "Location. The railroad's coming through next spring. Anyone who owns property on Main Street will make a fortune. Tate knows it, I know it. But this place is more than an investment to me." Nathaniel nodded, understanding all too well how a place could become part of your soul. He'd had a ranch once, before the war changed everything. You said you have no options. What about family? None close enough to help in time. My brother's in California. It would take weeks for a letter to reach him, let alone for him to send money. She stared into her coffee cup. I've thought about selling the silver service my mother left me, but it wouldn't bring enough. And what will you do when Tate comes back tonight? Her green eyes flashed. Fight. This is my home, Nathaniel. I won't give it up without one. There it was again, that spirit that had caught his attention the night before. Meredith Chambers wasn't just fighting for a building, she was fighting for her future, for the dream she'd shared with her husband. Nathaniel hadn't thought about the future in years. Ever since Shiloh, where he'd lost his brother and nearly his own life, he'd lived day to day, never planning further ahead than his next meal or the next town. The future was just a promise waiting to be broken. I need to check on my horse, he said, rising from the table. Thank you for breakfast. Will you be staying another night? She asked, and he heard the hope she tried to hide. I haven't decided, he answered honestly. The morning air was crisp as Nathaniel walked to the livery. His mind turned over Meredith's problem. $500 was a small fortune out here. Most men would need years to save that much. He had money sewn into his saddle payment for a job he'd done in Dakota Territory, but not nearly enough. At the stable, he found Ember well tended. The boy from yesterday was mucking out stalls. Your horse is mighty fine, mister, the boy said. Fast-looking. She is that, Nathaniel agreed, rubbing Ember's velvety nose. What's your name, boy? Samuel, sir. Sam Jackson. You work here full-time, Sam? Yes, sir. Since my pa died in the mine last year. Ma does laundry, I work here, we get by. The boy's matter-of-fact tone spoke of the harsh realities of life in a frontier town. You know much about what goes on around here, about Thomas Tate? Sam's expression darkened. Everyone knows Tate. Owns the big ranch east of town, plus the mercantile and the hotel, mean as a snake. Folks say he killed Deputy Chambers, but nobody could prove it. This was new information. I thought Chambers died investigating cattle rustlers. That's the official story. Sam lowered his voice. But Ma says Tate wanted Mrs. Chambers even when her husband was alive. Had words with the deputy more than once about it. Then Deputy Chambers goes out to investigate rustling on Tate's land and comes back dead. Mighty convenient, some say. Nathaniel's dislike of Tate deepened. Tate's trying to force Mrs. Chambers out of her saloon now. Sam nodded vigorously. Everybody knows, it ain't right, she's good people. Brings me and Ma soup when it's cold, never charges. Lets me read books from her shelf when I've time. You know if there's a marshal in town. Marshal Jenkins, but he won't cross Tate, gets paid not to notice things if you understand me. Nathaniel understood perfectly. He'd seen corruption like this before, powerful men buying the law, ordinary folks left to fend for themselves. It was one of the reasons he kept moving. Stay too long in one place and you started to care about such injustices. Caring led to fighting. Fighting led to more graves. He gave Sam an extra coin and headed into town, his steps taking him to the bank. Whispering Creek National Bank was a solid brick building, announcing its permanence in a town of mostly wooden structures. Inside, Nathaniel approached a teller and inquired about speaking with the manager. Mr. Holcomb, the bank manager, was a thin man with nervous hands and watery eyes. When Nathaniel asked about Meredith's loan, the man became even more fidgety. I'm afraid I cannot discuss Mrs. Chambers' business affairs with anyone but Mrs. Chambers herself, he said primly. I understand, Nathaniel replied, his voice casual. I was just wondering if there might be some arrangement possible, a payment plan perhaps. The terms are quite clear. The full amount is due by close of business tomorrow. And if she can't pay, Holcomb adjusted his spectacles, then the property will be forfeit to satisfy the debt. And go to Tate, I imagine. The bank manager's eyes widened slightly before he controlled his expression. I couldn't say what might happen to the property after foreclosure. I'm sure you couldn't, Nathaniel said dryly. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to pay off her loan, could they do so without her knowledge? Hypothetically, Holcomb said after a pause. A loan could be satisfied by any party with the funds to do so. Nathaniel nodded, thanked the man, and left. He had confirmed what he suspected. Tate and the bank were working together to steal Meredith's property. It was a common enough scheme in growing territories. What wasn't common was his own growing desire to stop it. He spent the rest of the day walking the town, taking its measure. Whispering Creek was like dozens of other frontier towns. He'd pass through a main street with the essential businesses, side streets with simple homes, the promise of growth when the railroad came. People nodded to him cautiously, the universal acknowledgement given to armed strangers who hadn't yet proven themselves trouble. By late afternoon, Nathaniel had made up his mind. He couldn't give Meredith the money she needed. He had only about $100 to his name, but he could offer something else. Time. He returned to the silver dollar as Meredith was preparing to open for the evening. She looked up in surprise when he entered. "You came back," she said, unable to hide her relief. "Said I'd stay a few days," he reminded her. "I'd like to offer my services while I'm here." Her eyebrows rose. "Services? Security." He leaned against the bar. "Tate's going to cause trouble. Having someone watching your back might help." "I can't pay you," she said bluntly. "Room and board is payment enough for now." He met her suspicious gaze steadily. "Consider it self-interest. I like having a peaceful place to drink." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but no killing unless there's no choice." "I don't want blood on my floor. It's hard enough to keep clean as it is." The hint of humor surprised a laugh out of him. "I'll do my best to aim any necessary shooting toward the door." As customers began filtering in for the evening, Nathaniel took a position at a corner table with his back to the wall, nursing a beer slowly. The regulars eyed him curiously, but seemed reassured by Meredith's easy manner toward him. The night progressed peacefully until about 9 o'clock, when Tate arrived with 6 men instead of the previous night's 2. Conversations died as they swaggered in, spreading out through the room in a way that told Nathaniel they'd done this before. "Evening, Meredith," Tate called, removing his hat with mocking politeness. "Thought I'd bring some thirsty men to help your business, being the generous sort that I am." "Your money's good here," she replied evenly, "as long as you behave." Tate smiled, the expression never reaching his cold eyes. "Always do, don't I, boys?" His gaze swept the room until it landed on Nathaniel. "I see your guard dog still hanging around. Didn't take you for the type to hide behind strangers." "Just serving drinks, Tate," Meredith said. "What'll you have?" The next hour passed in tense civility. Tate and his men drank steadily, played cards, and made just enough noise to be disruptive without giving cause for complaint. Nathaniel watched them carefully, noting which men carried guns and how they wore them. As the regular patrons began drifting out, leaving just Tate's crew and a few hardy drinkers, Meredith started cleaning up. That's when Tate made his move. "Come have a drink with me, Meredith," he called, patting the chair beside him. "We should discuss your situation like reasonable folk." "Nothing to discuss," she replied, continuing to wipe down the bar. "I have until tomorrow evening." "True," Tate agreed. "But why wait for the inevitable? Save yourself the humiliation. I'm prepared to be generous, let you keep living quarters upstairs, maybe even work here when it's mine." Nathaniel saw Meredith's knuckles whiten again, but her voice remained steady. "No, thank you. I prefer being the owner to being the help." Tate's face darkened. He stood, walking to the bar with deliberate slowness. "Pride's a sin, Meredith. Your husband had too much of it too." Look where that got him. The remaining patrons tensed at the barely veiled admission. Nathaniel shifted, drawing Tate's attention. "Still here, are you?" Tate asked. "You don't look like a man with $500 to lend, so what are you offering her instead?" "Just enjoying the whiskey," Nathaniel replied mildly. "It's better than most places." "I'll make it better still when this place is mine," Tate boasted. "Expand it, add girls, make it a proper saloon instead of this. Temperance hall with liquor." "Sounds like you've got big plans," Nathaniel commented. "Almost like you're certain the bank will foreclose." A flash of annoyance crossed Tate's face. It's no secret the widow can't pay, I'm just being practical. So am I, Meredith interjected, and practically speaking, it's closing time. You can come back tomorrow if you want another drink. For a moment, it seemed Tate might refuse to leave, then he smiled that cold smile again. Tomorrow it is then, our last night as customer and proprietress. He tipped his hat. Unless you reconsider my other offer. My door's always open to you, Meredith, always has been. After they left, Meredith sagged against the bar. He as good as admitted killing Michael. Nathaniel nodded. Sam at the livery told me people suspected as much. Everyone suspects, no one will testify. The marshal's in his pocket and witnesses tend to develop poor memories when Tate's involved. She looked exhausted suddenly, the brave front crumbling now that they were alone. I don't know what I'm going to do, Nathaniel. I've tried everything. Not everything, he said quietly. Come with me. I need to show you something. Curious, she followed him upstairs to his room. He closed the door and retrieved his saddle from the corner. With his knife, he carefully cut open a section of padding and extracted a small leather pouch. I have almost $100, he said, emptying the coins onto the bed. It's not enough, but I can't take your money, she interrupted, shaking her head, and it wouldn't solve anything. Even if I had the full amount, Tate would just find another way to come after me. I know, Nathaniel agreed, which is why I think we need to change the game entirely. What do you mean? Tate wants this place because the railroad's coming, but what if the railroad chose a different route? Meredith looked confused. The survey's already been done, the route's decided. Routes change, Nathaniel said, especially when there are problems with the original plan. What kind of problems? That's what we need to figure out. He paced the small room. Is there anyone in town who would know details about the railroad plans, engineers, surveyors? Meredith thought for a moment. Edwin Prescott, he's a retired engineer who consulted on the survey, lives just outside town. First thing tomorrow we'll talk to him, Nathaniel decided. For now, get some rest. I'll keep watch tonight in case Tate decides to come back. You think he might? Men like Tate don't like waiting when they want something. I've known his kind before. She nodded, then hesitated at the door. Why are you helping me, Nathaniel? You don't know me. This isn't your fight. He considered the question, searching for an honest answer. Maybe I'm tired of riding away from fights that matter. Her eyes softened. Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for not just passing through. After she left, Nathaniel checked his revolver and positioned a chair where he could see both the stairs and the back entrance. As the night hours ticked by, he found himself thinking about Meredith Chambers more than he should. There was something about her determination, her refusal to surrender what was hers, that stirred memories of the man he'd been before the war changed him. He'd once had plans, dreams, a vision of his future as clear as a mountain stream. Then the war came, taking his brother's life and leaving Nathaniel with a bullet lodged near his heart too dangerous to remove, the surgeon had said. A constant reminder of mortality. After that, planning for the future seemed pointless. Why build dreams on foundations that could crumble in an instant? So he drifted, taking work as it came, some legal, some not. He'd developed a reputation as a man good with a gun who didn't ask questions. The work paid well but cost him pieces of his soul with each job. Around midnight, a noise at the back door pulled him from his thoughts. Silent as a shadow, he moved to investigate. Through the window, he saw two of Tate's men trying to force the lock. Nathaniel opened the door suddenly, his gun aimed steadily. "Saloon's closed, gentlemen," he said quietly. "I suggest you find somewhere else to drink." The men froze, then slowly backed away, hands raised. "Just looking for a late drink," one mumbled unconvincingly. "Try knocking next time," Nathaniel suggested. "And tell Tate that if he wants this place, he'll have to wait for the bank like he planned. Breaking in will just get his men shot." They retreated into the darkness, and Nathaniel locked the door securely. The attempt confirmed his suspicions. Tate was growing impatient, perhaps worried that Meredith might somehow find the money after all. Morning came with no further incidents. Meredith looked surprised to find Nathaniel still awake when she came downstairs. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, concern in her voice. "I'll catch up later," he assured her. "We had visitors last night, Tate's men trying to break in." Alarm crossed her face. They left when asked politely at gunpoint," he said, "but it means Tate's getting anxious. We should see Prescott as soon as possible." After a quick breakfast, they set out to visit the retired engineer. Edwin Prescott lived in a neat cabin a mile outside town, surrounded by drawing tables covered with maps and technical drawings. The old man greeted them warmly, especially Meredith. "Mrs. Chambers, what a pleasant surprise, and who's your friend?" "This is Nathaniel Edwards," Meredith introduced. "We need your expertise, Mr. Prescott." The engineer invited them in, offering coffee that Nathaniel gratefully accepted after his sleepless night. Once they were settled, Meredith explained their situation, Tate's pressure, the loan, and their suspicion that it was all connected to the railroad's arrival. "You're not wrong about that," Prescott confirmed. "The current route will put the station right across from your saloon. Property values on Main Street will triple at least." "Is the route final?" Nathaniel asked. "Could it change?" Prescott stroked his white beard thoughtfully. "Routes can always change if there's sufficient reason, safety concerns, engineering challenges, that sort of thing." "What kind of challenges?" Meredith pressed. "Well, unstable ground would be a major one. The current route crosses Whispering Creek just north of town where the bank is narrowest. If that crossing proved unsafe..." Nathaniel leaned forward. "How would one determine if it was unsafe?" Prescott's eyes twinkled with understanding. "A proper geological survey would be required, soil samples, test drillings. Of course, any citizen with concerns could request such a survey from the railroad company, especially someone with relevant knowledge, someone like a retired engineer." Meredith suggested. "Precisely." Prescott rose and moved to a large map on one of his tables. "The interesting thing is, I've always had reservations about that crossing. The soil composition is questionable sandy, with potential for erosion during spring floods." "You didn't mention this during the initial survey?" Nathaniel asked. Prescott's expression darkened. "I did. But certain interests, namely Mr. Tate and his associates on the town council, were eager for the route to favor Main Street properties. My concerns were overlooked." "Would you be willing to raise those concerns again?" Meredith asked. Officially, the old man studied her for a long moment. "Thomas Tate is a dangerous enemy to make, Mrs. Chambers. He's threatened people who have stood against him before." "I know the risk," she said quietly. "But this is my home, my livelihood. I can't let him take it without a fight." Prescott nodded slowly. "Your husband was a good man. He helped me when some of Tate's cowboys thought it would be amusing to vandalize an old man's home." He straightened his shoulders. "Yes, I'll help you. I can draft a formal letter expressing my professional concerns about the crossing. It won't change things immediately, but it will force a new survey." "How long would that take?" Nathaniel asked. "Months, at least. The railroad company would need to send their own engineers, conduct tests." "Months we don't have," Meredith said, disappointment clear in her voice. "The loan is due today." "Perhaps," Prescott said slowly, "we need something more immediate, something that would make the railroad company question the crossing's safety right away." "What did you have in mind?" Nathaniel asked. A mischievous smile spread across the old engineer's face. "Tell me, Mr. Edwards, how are you with explosives?" They left Prescott's cabin with a plan dangerous and not entirely legal, but a plan nonetheless. The engineer would write his letter of concern immediately and send it by express rider to the railroad company's regional office in Helena. Meanwhile, Nathaniel would create a demonstration of the crossing's instability that very night. "This is madness," Meredith said as they rode back toward town, Nathaniel on Ember and Meredith on a borrowed mare. "If you're caught, you'll hang." "Only if they can prove it was deliberate," Nathaniel replied. "Prescott says that area is known for methane pockets in the soil." "A natural explosion isn't unheard of. It's still too risky," she insisted. I can't let you do this for me. I'm not doing it just for you, he said, surprising himself with his honesty. Tate killed your husband and bought the law. Men like that shouldn't win. They rode in silence for a while before Meredith spoke again. What will you do after? When this is over, one way or another? The question caught him off guard. He'd been so focused on the immediate problem that he hadn't considered what came next. Move on, I suppose. It's what I do. Is that what you want? She asked, her green eyes searching his face. To always be moving on. No one had asked him what he wanted in a very long time. The question stirred something in him, something he'd thought long buried. I used to want different things, he admitted. Land of my own. Cattle, a home. He touched his chest where the bullet still resided. The war changed my perspective. The war changed everyone, she said softly. But it's been over for more than a decade, Nathaniel. At some point we have to start building again instead of just surviving. Her words stayed with him as they returned to town. While Meredith opened the saloon for the day's business, Nathaniel went to gather the supplies Prescott had recommended for the night's work. The general store provided most of what he needed: kerosene, fuses, basic mining supplies that wouldn't raise eyebrows in a town with active mines nearby. As evening approached, tension hung over the silver dollar like storm clouds. Regular customers drank quietly, clearly aware that something was brewing between Meredith and Tate. Nathaniel remained vigilant, watching the door for Tate's inevitable arrival. Just before 8 o'clock, Tate entered alone, a surprise that put Nathaniel immediately on alert. The rancher walked directly to the bar where Meredith stood, her face composed though Nathaniel could see the tension in her shoulders. "Evening, Meredith," Tate said, his voice carrying through the room. "I believe we have business to conclude." "The bank doesn't close until 9, she replied. "I still have time." Tate smiled thinly. "Time for what? A miracle?" He reached into his coat and produced an official-looking document. "I've saved you a trip to the bank. Mr. Holcomb was kind enough to let me deliver this notice of foreclosure personally." "He can't do that," Meredith protested. "The full term, read the fine print, my dear," Tate interrupted. "The bank reserves the right to accelerate the loan term under certain conditions. Your declining business qualifies." "My business isn't declining," she snapped. "You've been scaring away my customers," Tate shrugged. "A matter of interpretation. Either way, the property is now legally mine." He looked around the room with satisfaction. "I'll give you until morning to remove your personal belongings. I'm not completely heartless." Nathaniel moved to Meredith's side. "The document," he said quietly. "May I see it?" Meredith handed it to him, her fingers trembling slightly. Nathaniel scanned the legal language, looking for any flaw or loophole. "This says the property transfers at 9 o'clock tonight," he pointed out. "It's not yours yet, Tate," the rancher's eyes narrowed. "A technicality. Unless she can produce $500 in the next hour, it's as good as done." "Then I suggest you come back at 9, Nathaniel said, his voice mild but his eyes hard. "Until then, you're just another customer. So either order a drink or leave." For a moment, it seemed Tate might object, then he smiled coldly. "I'll have a whiskey, and I'll stay right here to watch the clock." The next hour crawled by with excruciating slowness. Tate sat at the bar, ostentatiously checking his pocket watch every few minutes. Meredith continued serving drinks with mechanical precision, her face a mask of dignity that Nathaniel found himself admiring more with each passing minute. At 5 minutes to 9, Nathaniel slipped outside to retrieve the supplies he'd hidden behind the building. The plan had been to create the diversion at the creek crossing after the saloon closed, but Tate's early appearance had changed things. They needed the distraction now before ownership officially transferred. He was preparing to leave when Meredith followed him outside, her face pale in the moonlight. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "Tate's about to take everything." "I'm trying to stop him," Nathaniel replied, securing the bag of supplies to his saddle. "Prescott's plan might work, but I need to move now." "It won't matter if I lose the saloon before you can create your diversion," she argued. "The bank will have already transferred the deed." She was right, and they both knew it. Nathaniel looked at her, this woman who refused to surrender what was hers, and made a decision. "Wait here," he said, and strode back into the saloon. Tate looked up as he approached, a triumphant smile on his face. "Come to watch the changing of ownership, gunslinger?" "Actually," Nathaniel said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his money pouch. "I've come to settle Mrs. Chambers' debt." He counted out $98 onto the bar, nearly everything he possessed in the world. Tate's smile faltered. "That's not enough," he said, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "It's a partial payment," Nathaniel replied evenly. "Enough to demonstrate good faith and extend the terms." "The bank won't accept partial payment," Tate insisted. "Let's find out." Nathaniel turned to the stunned patrons watching the exchange. "Any of you gentlemen care to help a neighbor keep her business? Any contribution welcome?" There was a moment of stillness, then an old miner stepped forward, placing a gold coin on the bar. "For the best whiskey in the territory," he said gruffly. A rancher followed, then another miner, then the blacksmith. One by one, the townspeople came forward, contributing what they could, some only a few cents, others $1 or $2. Meredith watched in disbelief as the pile grew. Tate's face darkened with each new contribution. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "A community charity case won't change anything." "Seems to me it already has," Nathaniel observed as the clock struck 9. "Looks like Mrs. Chambers has quite a bit of support in Whispering Creek." The pile of money continued to grow until it reached nearly $200, not enough to pay off the loan, but enough to make a statement. The message to Tate was clear. Meredith Chambers was not alone. Tate glared at the assembled townspeople. "You're all making a mistake," he warned. "I have a long memory." "So do we," the blacksmith replied, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "Maybe it's time someone reminded you of that, Tate." The atmosphere in the room had shifted. For perhaps the first time, Tate found himself outnumbered not just physically, but in resolve. He snatched up the foreclosure notice. "This doesn't change anything," he insisted. "The full amount is still due." "But not tonight," Nathaniel countered. "That's a substantial good faith payment. Any court would grant an extension based on that." Tate's jaw worked as he calculated his options. Finally, he stuffed the notice back in his pocket. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low with fury. Not by a long shot. After he stormed out, the saloon erupted in cheers. Meredith moved through the crowd, thanking each person who had contributed. When she finally reached Nathaniel, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I can't believe you did that," she said. "Your money." "Just buying time," he said, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "We still need to deal with Tate permanently." "I should get to the creek crossing while everyone's distracted." She caught his arm as he turned to leave. "No, there's been enough risk taking tonight if Tate catches you out there alone." She had a point. Tate would be looking to vent his humiliation on someone, and Nathaniel would be an obvious target if caught with explosives. "Tomorrow night, then," he conceded. "We'll stick with Prescott's original plan. Tonight we should make sure Tate doesn't try anything else against the saloon." The rest of the night passed peacefully. The townspeople, emboldened by their stand against Tate, lingered longer than usual, creating an atmosphere of celebration. Meredith served drinks with genuine smiles, her relief palpable, though they both knew this was just a temporary reprieve. Later, after the last customer had left and the doors were locked, Meredith found Nathaniel at his usual corner table, cleaning his revolver by lamplight. "I never really thanked you properly," she said, sitting across from him. "What you did tonight, I don't have words." He concentrated on reassembling his gun. "Those people care about you, they just needed someone to take the first step." It was more than that. She reached across the table, her fingers gently covering his. "You've been a stranger your whole life, haven't you? Moving from place to place, never letting yourself belong anywhere." The perceptiveness of her observation unsettled him. "It's simpler that way. Simpler, yes, but lonely." She withdrew her hand slowly. "I know about lonely, Nathaniel. After Michael died, I thought I'd never feel anything but alone, even with people all around me. "And now," he asked, unable to stop himself, "now I'm not sure what I feel." She met his gaze directly. "Except that when you rode into town, something changed. For the first time in 2 years, I started thinking about possibilities instead of just surviving." Her honesty demanded equal honesty from him. "I haven't thought about possibilities in a long time. Maybe you should start," she suggested softly. "It starts right here, Nathaniel, the future. It's just a matter of being brave enough to reach for it." Her words resonated in a way he hadn't expected. The future. For years, he'd avoided even considering it, living moment to moment, town to town. The bullet near his heart was a constant reminder that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. Yet sitting across from Meredith, he found himself wondering for the first time in years what it might be like to stay. "I'm not sure I remember how to do that," he admitted. "Neither am I," she confessed, "but I think I'd like to try." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. News of the standoff at the saloon had spread throughout Whispering Creek, creating a buzz of excitement. Several people stopped by to offer additional contributions to Meredith's cause, bringing the total to nearly $300. "It's still not enough," she worried as they counted the money. "And Tate won't be content with just forcing me out now. It's become personal." "That's why we're still going ahead with Prescott's plan tonight," Nathaniel reminded her. "If we can delay the railroad, Tate loses his primary motivation for wanting this place." A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Nathaniel moved instinctively to position himself between Meredith and potential danger, his hand resting on his holstered revolver as she opened the door. To their surprise, it was Mr. Holcomb, the bank manager, looking nervous and out of place. "Mrs. Chambers," he said, removing his hat, "might I have a word? In private?" Meredith glanced at Nathaniel, who nodded but remained within earshot as she invited Holcomb inside. "I've come about your loan," the banker began, his voice low. "There have been developments." "What kind of developments?" Meredith asked warily. Holcomb cleared his throat. "It seems that upon review, the acceleration clause was improperly applied in your case. The bank is prepared to reinstate the original terms of the loan, with payment due next year as originally agreed." Meredith stared at him in disbelief. "What brought about this sudden change of heart, Mr. Holcomb?" The banker shifted uncomfortably. "Let's just say certain board members reconsidered the bank's position after learning of community support for your establishment." "Tate pressured you to call in my loan," Meredith stated flatly. "What's pressuring you to reverse that decision now?" Holcomb's eyes darted nervously to the doorway where Nathaniel stood. "Mrs. Chambers, banking is a complex business. Decisions are made based on various factors, such as Tate's influence," she interrupted. "And now someone else's. Who?" Before Holcomb could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was Marshall Jenkins, the lawman Sam had described as being in Tate's pocket. "Morning, folks," Jenkins said, nodding to each of them. "Mr. Holcomb, I see you're delivering the good news about Mrs. Chambers' loan." "I was just explaining the situation," the banker mumbled. "Excellent." Jenkins turned to Meredith. "Mrs. Chambers, I wanted to personally inform you that Thomas Tate has been arrested." This was the last thing either Meredith or Nathaniel had expected. "Arrested," she echoed. "On what charges?" "Murder," Jenkins said grimly. "The murder of your husband, Deputy Michael Chambers." In the stunned silence that followed, Jenkins explained that one of Tate's men, Willis Parker, had come forward with a confession. Parker had been present when Tate ambushed Michael Chambers, shooting him in the back and staging it to look like rustlers were responsible. "Parker's been carrying the guilt for 2 years," Jenkins continued. "After what happened here last night, he decided it was time for the truth to come out. He gave a sworn statement this morning." "And you arrested Tate based on the word of his own man?" Nathaniel asked skeptically. Jenkins had the grace to look ashamed. "Parker had evidence the deputy's personal effects that Tate kept as trophies. And once Parker started talking, 2 ranch hands who helped with the cover-up came forward too." "Why now?" Meredith asked, her voice barely above a whisper. After all this time, sometimes one act of courage inspires another, Jenkins said, glancing at Nathaniel. What happened here last night showed folks that standing together against Tate was possible. Parker said watching the town finally take a stand made him realize he could too. After the marshal and banker left, promising that all legal pressure on the saloon was officially lifted, Meredith sat in stunned silence. Nathaniel poured her a small whiskey, which she accepted with trembling hands. "I never thought I'd see justice for Michael," she said after taking a sip. "I'd almost given up hoping." Nathaniel sat beside her. "Sometimes justice takes its time. And sometimes it needs a nudge," she added, looking at him with something like wonder. "If you hadn't ridden into town when you did." He shook his head. "The townspeople were always on your side. They just needed someone to show them it was okay to say so." "And now what happens?" she asked, the question encompassing far more than just the immediate future. Nathaniel found himself at a crossroads he hadn't anticipated. With Tate arrested and the loan restored to its original terms, Meredith no longer needed his help. The logical step would be to move on, as he always did. Yet the thought of riding away from Whispering Creek from her suddenly seemed impossible to contemplate. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that creek crossing still might not be the best place for the railroad bridge." A smile began to form on her lips. "Mr. Prescott would probably agree with you. And the Silver Dollar could probably use some renovations before the railroad brings more business to town." "It could," she agreed, her smile growing. "The roof leaks when it rains, and the back storeroom needs shelving." "I'm pretty handy with a hammer," he offered. "And I hear the room upstairs is available for long-term rental." Meredith's eyes shone with unspoken emotion. "How long-term were you thinking?" Nathaniel took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I'm not sure. I've never been good at planning for the future." "It starts right here," she reminded him softly. "The future. Right now with this choice." And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Edwards looked ahead and saw not emptiness but possibility. The bullet near his heart would always be a reminder of mortality, but perhaps it could also remind him of the importance of living fully in whatever time remained. "Then I choose to stay," he said, "for as long as you'll have me." Meredith's answer came not in words but in the gentle press of her lips against his, a kiss that tasted of whiskey and promise, and the future that had finally found them both. In the years that followed, Whispering Creek grew from a dusty frontier town into a thriving community, as the railroad did indeed come through, though the creek crossing was moved a half-mile south after certain geological concerns were raised by a respected retired engineer. The Silver Dollar expanded, becoming not just a saloon but a hotel that welcomed weary travelers stepping off the train. Nathaniel and Meredith were married that first spring, a celebration that brought the entire town together. They built their life day by day, never taking for granted the gift they had found in each other. Nathaniel learned that planning for the future didn't jinx it but enriched it, and Meredith discovered that loving again didn't diminish what she had shared with Michael but honored it. They had 2 children, a boy who grew up to be as steady and true as his father, and a daughter with her mother's copper hair and unwavering determination. Through droughts and blizzards, good years and lean ones, they faced what came together, always remembering that moment when possibility opened before them like a door to a room filled with light. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the saloon closed for the night, they would sometimes sit on the porch of the home they had built, watching the stars appear one by one in the Montana sky. In those moments, Nathaniel would take Meredith's hand, still marveling that a man who had once never trusted the future had found in her the courage to embrace it. "It started right here," he would say, and she would smile, knowing exactly what he meant, the future. Always uncertain, but infinitely precious when shared with those you love.